Right, folks, here we go. Welcome back. Welcome to the next stage, my friends. Before we begin, let me say this in Neo-Khuzdul, idmi gagin buhaye. Ati gedul hagala nurts, kamala nurts nabhari gagin buhaye. Bir. Oh, and if you didn't catch all of that, that's perfectly fine. I think most of you grasped probably most of it, if not all. But you're not expected to be instantly fluent again from the first moment. What you've learned hasn't disappeared. It simply needs a little time to settle back into place, I guess. As we move forward, recognition and understanding will return naturally, and confidence will follow, I would say. But being here, you've already reached an important milestone, in my opinion. You've completed the beginner course and passed that exam, meaning you have a solid working foundation of Neo-Khuzdul. Congratulations. This course is built directly on that foundation. The intermediate course follows the same overall, methodology, I would say, and teaching approach as the beginner's course. So we'll rely more on the basics that you've learned, though, occasionally glancing back when needed, but really without repeating the whole thing. That's not the intent here. Each new topic will still be introduced clearly and step by step, while we spend some more time exploring, I would say, the logic behind certain patterns. The main goal remains unchanged, really, which is to increase fluency, both in understanding the language and in speaking it with confidence. The course is not about leaving uncertainty hanging in the air. My aim is always to keep explanations as clear as I can, reduce confusion as much as possible, and remain open to questions at all times. Even when the material is new, you shouldn't feel uncomfortable, let me say, working with it. So keep in mind, you're not starting over here. You're continuing where we left off. So welcome back. So let's begin. All right, the opening slide. Ganudma Bizral Yotur is the title of the intermediate course. So you'll see this returning on each and every lesson that we have. Ganudma Bizral Yotur. So let's dissect this for a minute. Ganudma, if it sounds or looks kind of familiar, it is because you probably recognize it from Haburma and Nakukma. Haburma, let us listen. Nakukma, let us look at it, or look at. So it's a verb form we haven't seen yet, but we've seen it with Haburma and Nakukma, but we haven't seen it in detail. It means let us something, right? In this case, the radicals G and D link to Gundu from Gundabad, the holy mountain of the Longbeards, where Durin awoke, Gundabad, which basically means the mountain that was delved, the delved mountain, the first mountain to be delved by, in this case, Bahal, who put Durin to sleep there. So Ganudma means let us delve. And Bizral is linked to words that you've seen like bizar, bazar as well, which means deeply, and Yotur is more. So Ganudma, deeply, and then more. So let us delve deeply more, which basically means let us delve deeper. That is what it means. Magashurul. Now, sometimes you might think, okay, this ends with ul, so this is going to be an adjective. There are words in Khuzdul that, and quite a few of them actually, specifically of this sort, that are actually not adjectives. They can be used as adjectives, but they can also be used as a noun, which is, something English has on occasion. Like, for instance, the word roast. Roast can be the roast, or it can also be the roast chicken, for instance, adjective and noun as well. This magashurul means that which has been taught. Now, if you look at the radicals G, SH, and R, sometimes in my writing, if I end our Discord, if I give you the weekly roundup on Discord, I end with ukshar, which is teacher, ukshar. And you see magashrul uses the same G, SH, and R. So magashrul is that which has been taught, or is being taught. Magashrul, it's lesson basically. That is what it means, a lesson. So magashrul ze is lesson 1. And the theme for lesson 1 is asmakul. Now asmakul, using the radicals SMK, is related to actually an English word that also uses SM and K, or SMCK rather, to be exact. Giving you an example, a slight flavoring as in a smack of cinnamon, for instance. It might not be a very frequent English word, but it's an English word. Also, for those of you that speak Dutch, the word smaak, which means taste. So a slight flavor, a smack in English, Dutch smaak. So you can see where we're going with this. Asmakul is reflecting the same sensory domain. Asmakul basically means tasty. Though it's a bit more than just the word tasty, it also is used or can be used as an expression to say bon appetit, enjoy your meal. Guten Appetit, whatever you want to say in whatever language. It's enjoy your meal basically. Asmakul from let it be tasty. So asmakul is then the shortened form, if you will. So that is not just the adjective tasty, but also tasty in general as an expression of enjoy your meal said before eating. Right, so you can already think where we're heading with the general theme, I would say, of this first lesson. Right, the main title here of our first section is Ni Mimashlak. We'll see in a bit what a Mimashlak is and what is happening in the Mimashlak. And if I'm not mistaken, Haburma. So let me get the audio file. And here we go.
Plansgalik, hier Zuyothur, Ablad Yothorinkul.
Akon harkulur, igmi dumi mashlakma. Inki mahadruni, mayan ki raimune kadzu. Sadrizi azo forsanaki kamahudlag.
Bizirin Hamad. Marat Ramekai Bassen, Ra Lusul Uni Badem Zazim.
Kahasaki tada. Atsu shuluk limgumul. Igim niktau zahar us. Alanurt amkad ziran hanadul duma. Utrapma, sorsama daftu ora barat kalt hassas jahant. Eshul sapsul, daftul, eshul haga, asmakul haga. Ak lodaftul.
Tavagalik. Ak Kutati Tada Kustabligi.
Tada, shein tafar ab madul sigin sapsul. Arsul, Nahar, Galik kama badam kalil.
Rakust mi Zahar Keled. Targbiriz.
Urstard, Atta bi kagal abbat, Balaga imbara tarak tahaf sairul. Sir zai eze hamamul.
Raptati Kust Abambassen.
Kon, Atta bi baras ababad. Malaga sadnas asmak shalak. Samkur na double, ak masapsul hada.
Zudrai Klukwir. Azarali Amkad Iziram Hanadwil, Kasam Hili. Zai Zars Hambad Yotorinkwil. Rachel Akuzulu Zu Uglakwil.
Wujmu bahir, Ajal dabli.
Right, so as you can see, the overall length of the conversations that we're seeing in the intermediate course steps up quite a bit from the length of what we've seen in the beginner course. On average, it's between 2 and 3 times the length and the vocabulary size that we see. That is by intent. So just if it feels a little bit overwhelming, we'll go through all of it. Now, before I before I run it again, that we listen through it again. Anything that you can already see, things that you recognize, things you might think, okay, it's about this or that. Any rough guesses you might have? Yep, ablag, food, exactly. And zahar urs, the fire. Yeah, the fireplace, to be exact. All right, you know what? Let's listen to it again and let's go through it with the English translation side by side. Here we go.
Lansgalik, hier zuyot hur, ablad yot rinkul,
Akon harkulur, igmi dumi mashlakma. Inki mahadruni, mayan ki raimune kadzu. Sadrizi azo forsanaki kamaudlag.
bizirin hamad. Marat ramekai bassen, ra lusul uni badem zazim.
Kaasaki tada. Atsu shuluk limgumul. Gim niktau zahar us. Alanurt amkad ziran hanadul duma. Utrapma, sorsama daftura barat kalt hassas jahant. Eshul sapsul, daftul, eshul haga, asmakul haga. Ak lodaftul.
Tavagalik, ak kutati tada kustabligi,
Tada, shein tafar ab madul siging sapsul. Arsul, nahar, galik kama badam kalil.
ra kust mi zahar keled, targbiriz.
Urstard, ata bi kagal abbat, balaga imbarat rak tahaf sairul. Sir zai eze hamamul.
Raptati kust abambassen,
Kon, ata bi baras ababad. Malaga sadnas asmak shalak. Samkur na double, ak basapsul hada.
zudrai krukwe. Azarali amkad iziram ahnadwe, kasam hili. Zai zars hambad yotorinkwe, rashel akuzulu zu uglakwe.
Wujmuba here, ajal dabli.
Right, so we have a traveler, an ukdam, and an innkeeper, a bahal. Now, one thing, talking about the word bahal here for a second, it might ring a bell because obviously BH, it's related to the words for friend. So an innkeeper is one who, by profession, makes friends. That is pretty much what the literal meaning of an innkeeper is. A bahal. An ukdam is a traveler, and we'll see the radicals come back at a later point as well. I believe in the next lesson we'll see those come back as well. So let's go through it line by line, shall we? So we have a traveler coming in from far, 4 days on foot, no less. Most of it in bad weather. The fella is drenched and really hungry, apparently, but all is well because they have plenty of food, and eventually he decides on the Iron Hill stew with extra mushrooms, no less, and a mug of his best lager. Right, let's go through it line by line. So the first thing we'll see is that I'm not going to go over every single word, by the way, just those that needs particular attention. So the first line, Lansgalik, hier zuyotur ablag yotorinkul. So the word here is translated in English as is there. So we've seen words like yom, yir, and tir, which are basically covering the locational there. So if you're talking about it is over there, it's right there, those things are the words yom, yir, and tir. That's what we've seen in the beginner lesson. But English also uses a word for there that has nothing to do with location. Like, is there any food left in this example here. Is there? That's, we're not talking about location. So if in English, it's fairly simple to know when you need to use hier and when you need to use yom, yir, and tir. When it's related to an actual location, you'll use yom, yir, and tir with the separation that we've explained in the beginner lesson. But when it's not related to location at all, you'll use hier. Now, you'll also note that we don't translate the verb to be in this case. In English, it's translated as is there. So you'd think, hey, why don't we write tati hier? That's not needed. Hier encapsulates a verb in itself. So if you say hier zoyotur ablak yoturinkul, this here counts for is there. That's the translation. So main thing to take away from this is here means there or is there or are there, but it is a non-locational there. Okay, so anytime you use there in English that doesn't refer to a location, you'll use here. Right, the word zuyotur and yoturinkul both use the word yotur, which you've seen, which is the word more. Zu is the word for now, so zuyotur literally means now more, which basically means still. So zuyotur is still, and then you have yotorinkul, which means extra, additional, spare, or leftover. So yotorinkul comes from more, and then the gerund form ink. We haven't seen that yet, but that's where it comes from. And then the adjective element ul. So yoturinkul, it means some extra, some additional, spare, or leftover. That's yoturinkul. So if you say ablag yoturinkul, any leftover food, any spare food, like in this case, translated, is there still food left? So that is yoturinkul. Now, it starts with the title Ni Mimashlak. Now, a mimashlak is literally translates as small drinker. So mim is the word for small, mim, and ashlak is drinker, the thing that drinks or provides drinks even, drinker. So small drinkery, small eatery, roadside tavern, wayside inn. That's how you could translate mimashlak. Note that although the translation in English says at the roadside inn, we translated it with ni mimashlak. So this is something we've seen in the beginner lesson. In one of the documents, it was listed when we were discussing when to use in and at, so when to use ni and zai. So the reason here is when you speak about arriving or being at a location, you use ni in Neo-Khuzdul instead of zai. So I am at home would be translated as ati ni zahar, right? And not ati zai zahar, so to be clear. So zai is at or with, but ni could also mean at when you're talking about arriving at a location or being at a location. Then, in this case, ni mimashlak. Let's see, we also have in the next line, mahadrulni. So let me go over the line in total. So the Bahal says, akun harkulul. So indeed, plenty. So harkulul, the word for plenty. Idmi dumima shlakma. So our small roadside inn. So small roadside inn is what is the translation I've used here for mimashlak. So mimashlak ma, our small roadside inn. And then inki mahadrulni. Bainkid Raimunekadzu Sadrizi Azafar Sanaki Kama Udlak. So Inki Mahadrulni, come inside. So Inki is from the verb that we've already seen. Inki is also a form that you've seen in the imperative. So to come. And then Mahadrulni. So inside, we've seen in and into, which is the word ni. But inside comes from mahadrul, which means that which is contained, and then the word ni, so mahadrul ni. So it is contained inside. Then the opposite of mahadrul ni is mahadrul tu. And just like ni is actually in, which is the reverse, tu is also the reverse of out, right? So mahadrul tu means outside, outdoors, in the open, while mahadrul ni means inside, enclosed, within. So mahadrul ni, in this case here, he says, come inside mahadrul ni. So mahadrul tu would be the opposite, which means that which is contained out, which is outside, basically. Then there's a word there, raimunikadzu. Now, an element of that you might recall, which is nekat. Can anybody recall what nekat means? Yep, clothing. Absolutely. A piece of clothing is nekat. So it translates here as, so your cloak, raimunikadzu. So we can cut off the zu, which is the your element. So we have raimunikad. So nekat is the last piece, which is clothing piece. So we're left basically with a raimu that we don't know. Now raimu is a part of the body, which is the back. The back. So I clearly say the part of the body because in English you have many words that mean back. So like come back and all of that. That's not it. Those are different words in Neo-Khuzdul. So a raimu is your back, basically the body, right? The back of the body. That is raimu. So raimu nekadzu is your cloak because it is the clothing piece of the back, basically. That is the cloak, right? So take off your cloak. You look like you've come from far. Sadrizi azafar sanaki kama udlag. So sadrizi is you look. Now, the thing is, you need to be careful with this translation because you look, you might think, okay, he is looking at something. No, with you look, in this case, we mean you appear to be, you seem to be. So, sadrizi, from the verbal stem dris and durus, is basically you appear to be, you seem to be. Okay, so sadrizi is you seem to be, and then azafar is the word for like. So it seems like you have come from far. Sanaki is a verb we know. You come, and then kama udlag, and udlag is far or far away, which is related to such words as distance, range, or even exile. So far and far away, udlag. Azafar, by the way, is is a bit of a peculiar word. I've written quite a bit about azafar in the lesson notes. There's about 8 pages of lesson notes here, so I don't think you'll have to note a lot. But what azafar is concerned, it's a bit of a strange word. It's similar to the Hebrew word kamo, which means like or as, just like this means like as well. Why is it similar? Because it has nothing to do with the radicals of the word itself. So the azafar, you'd think, okay, this is related to any word that has Z, F, and R in it. There's only one type of word that has Z, F, and R in it and has nothing to do with the concept of like or in the manner of. That radical, by the way, is used for lead or covering things in lead. Now, why is that? Because it is something which is included in Neo-Khuzdul, that I intentionally included in Neo-Khuzdul, which is also present in Semitic languages. It is words that come from an unknown source that might appear to link to another radical at first glance, but if you delve deeper, they have nothing to do with it. And that gives a bit of a feel of really natural language in there. It's likely then that azafar was originally azahafar with an H. So that, because there's a radical also ZH that no longer is in use in classical Khuzdul. So it's possible that it came from there. It also might have come from a Blue Mountain Khuzdul dialect, etc., etc. But just so you know, in simple terms, azafar means like or in the manner of. Right, picking it up a bit. We have the next line. The traveler says, Bizirin Hanat, so innkeeper asking where he came from. Bizirin Hanat, from the Iron Hills. Narat Ramik Aybasan, 4 days on foot. Now, Nurt, we've seen, which is day, narat, the plural, narat ramik, 4 days, on foot, so aya bassen, ay bassen, on foot, bassen, the word for foot, ra lusulu ni badem zazin. Now we've seen badem, which is weather, right? We've seen galik, which is good, but now we are seeing what the opposite of good is, bad, which is zazin. Now, lusulu, most of it. Now, this is an interesting word because lusulu is kind of like a glass half empty expression of most of it. What I mean is this. So, lu is the word for not, and then sulu is the word for all. So, not all. It expresses most by excluding totality, right? While in English, that's the contrast. It's a kind of glass half full expression because it emphasizes the majority is included rather than that the minority is excluded, if you see what I mean. So although the meaning and practice is 100% the same, the underlying approach or perspective differs. So lusulu focuses on what is missing from all, while most focuses on what belongs to the majority. But that's also one of the things that you will see with Maya languages. They look at things differently sometimes. The meaning behind it is identical. The way you get there is different. So it's another thing you'll see in languages, and Neo-Khuzdul should not be any difference. So hence the difference here is not the concept, but or not the quantity, but the angle of looking at things. Now, one thing that we'll see here in this text is words like atsu and atta, that atsu shuluk nimgumul, for instance. Atsu translates here as you are. Now, we have seen the perfect forms for several verbs, but we haven't seen it for to be. This is an example, or at least we haven't seen it in detail. This is an example of to be with a perfect form. So this innkeeper is looking at the traveler, and he's clearly seeing that he's drenched. For him, that is a dependable fact. He could have used the imperfect because it's vividly happening in front of him, but he is clearly stressing that that is very factual to him and that he probably wants to address that. Hence the following line, sit by the fireplace. So atsu is, excuse me, is you are. Shuluk nimgumul. Now, nimgumul means around, and that's related to the word imgam, meaning circle or round. So nimgumul. Now, shuluk is related to words like shalak and shalak and sheluku and all of those, which basically is related to words of water, and shuluk here means wet. So wet around, so wet all around, if you will, meaning drenched or soaking wet. So if he says here, atsu shuluk nimgumul, means you are drenched. So next line is igim niktal zahar urs, sit by the fire. Now, something I want to say about igim is in one of the key features I learned in the beginner lesson is, or I try to teach in the beginner lessons here, is that almost every word, every letter in a word is pronounced in Neo-Khuzdul. That's fairly accurate, I would say, but there are a couple of exceptions, and we're seeing one of them here. Now, sometimes you will have a radical glottal stop that is in a fairly unusual position, let me put it that way. Igim is one of those. Now, if I say igim, you don't hear that glottal stop very clearly, or not at all even, and that is by intent. So in Neo-Khuzdul, this igim, this glottal stop you see right after the I in igim is a silent letter. And the silent letter is a letter that is, well, it's written, but it's not pronounced. And in practice, almost all silent letters in Neo-Khuzdul are silent glottal stops. Now, it's a feature also found in other Semitic languages, by the way. Now, why is this? Because it is a natural evolution in a language when you have when a glottal stop is basically between a vowel and a consonant, because it's almost impossible to pronounce it that way. So you would need to say igim, igim. It's possible, but because of the stress that you put there, and especially when it's initial in a line, it eventually gets smoothened out. And that's one of the first silent letters that you'll see popping up in any language, to be honest. Semitic languages are no exception. So just keep in mind, and it's basically a blessing that this is a silent letter, because otherwise it would be very challenging to pronounce. So igim niktal zahar urs, and not igim niktal zahar urs. It's possible to push out a glottal stop once a vowel follows. It's very hard after a vowel and before a consonant, and eventually leads to silent letters, and that's what you have here as well. So igim niktal zahar urs. Then alanurt amkad zirin hanadul duma. Today we have Iron Hill stew. So alanurt today, amkad is stew, then zirin hanadul, and then duma we have. You might recall the very strange verb of to have, that you basically say what it is that you have, and then at the end of that line you say to me, to you, to us, to, that's the to have form. So duma in this case, to us, or specifically we have, that's what it means. Utrap ma, our specialty. So, one thing I want to say quickly, going back to the previous one here, sit by the fire, it says. Now we're not translating by the fire exactly, because we're saying here sit near the fire. Now, might be strange, but this is sit by the fire is an English fixed expression. Let me put it that way. A lot of languages will express that a little bit differently. So in Neo-Khuzdul here, it's sit near the fire. You don't say sit by the fire. And niktal, meaning near, which is related to words such as nearby, proximity, vicinity, or even closely. So ningutul is closely, ungat is nearby. So all of those are related to that word niktal. So igim niktal zahra, or sit near the fire. Just wanted to go back on that. Now the word utrap means specialty, related to the radicals TRB. So that are radicals linked to skill, craft, practiced ability. So utrap means the greatest skill, the highest level of craft. That is what utrap means. So rather than referring to skill in general, it points to the area in which someone is especially strong. They are trained, they are accomplished, they know the thing better than anybody else, basically. It's their greatest skill. So this translates in this context as our specialty. Because, well, that is what they do best. That is what they are known for, right? It's not a random skill. It's one's specialty, a standout craft or primary area of expertise, if you will. So utrapma, our specialty. And their specialty is, if you're into that kind of thing, looks rather delicious, buttered mushrooms with pork and bread. So zars hamad daftul barat galt hasas. So zars hamad, let's start with that. Zars hamad. So there's a word there. There's actually two words that you should be able to decipher in that one. Zars hamad. Anybody want to take a stab at it? Zars actually is the word for tree. You might recall the word zirsin, the forest. Yeah. So zars is the word for tree, and then hamad, think of himdin. Think of hamad. We've seen, I think. And it's where you get kasab, for instance. All right, that's the himdin. So hamad is the plural for bread. So, and zars is tree, so tree bread. So literally a mushroom in Dwarvish means tree breads, or the breads of the tree, if you will. Which is, it's one way of looking at it. It's a slice of, well, it could be from a tree, and not always, I guess. But anywho, Dwarvish Zarshamad is mushrooms. Then he says buttered mushrooms, daftul. Daftul is buttered. A bit further in that line, we have daftul, which means greasy. So why is, daftul buttery and daftul greasy? Because they're from different words, related, obviously. Grease, butter. I mean, you can see the link. Daftul comes from the word daft, which is butter or fat. And daftul comes from the word dafat, which is grease. So that's why one is daftul, the other one is daftul. So buttered or greasy. Then we have barat galt hassas, which translates as pork. Now, English has a very weird thing. For English speakers, that's not weird at all. That's just the way it is. But for people from other languages, it is weird. That's you have animals that are named one thing, and the meat of that animal is named something else. That is a weird thing in many languages. That is because, well, the Normans invaded England rather, and then pushed their Normandic French upon the Anglo-Saxons, and their language became mingled with a lot of French, and porc in French, pork in English, while the animal is still called pig in English. So that's also the reason why you have a word stone, which comes from Germanic stein, and a rock, which comes from the French roche. It means the same thing. You just have two words for it in English. So just saying, Neo-Khuzdul doesn't have anything like that. The word for the meat is just assigned with the word hassas, and hassas means meat. So you have barat, which is pink, galt, which is boar. So a pink boar is a pig. A pink boar is a pig. So barat galt hassas basically means the meat of the pink boar. So the meat of the pig, or in other words, pork. So pork with bread. So barat galt hassas ya hamt. So you might recall that coffee with milk also used the word ya. So if you do a combination of those things, you don't use zai, which is also with, but you use ya. So same here, barat galt hassas ya hamt. Now we're getting to the flavors that are being described. So he says savory, buttery, very salty, very tasty, but not greasy, which is eshul sapsul daftul eshul haga asmakul haga aklu daftul. So savory, buttery, very salty, very tasty, but not greasy. We'll go into those in a little bit more detail in a bit about all of those tastes. Then, that's good, says the traveler, but what's that dwarf eating there? Ak kut tatitada kust tabli. That is Sheen Tafar Ababadul Sigin Sapsul. So, Sheen is the word for roast, and like by matter of coincidence, really, the word roast also is used as adjective and noun, or can also be used as adjective and noun, just like in English, because Shane belongs to an adjective type 5, which is exactly the same pattern as Shane, which is the type 2 noun. So hence, you could say Shane referring to roast as a thing, the prepared foods, the roast. Or you could also say the adjective, the roast chicken, for instance, right? So Sheen Tafar Abadul, so roast from the Grey Mountains. Sigin Sapsul is peppered. And that comes from, Sigin is long, as you know, and then Saps is the word for spice. Then we add ul for the adjective. So literally it means long spiced. Now this actually deliberately echoes the historical meaning of pepper in the real world. The English word pepper ultimately, it comes from the ancient term referring to the long pepper. One of the earliest and most widely traded spices, really. So in this sense, pepper originally meant the long spice rather than the specific ground pepper we think of today. So, as a bit of a linguistic wink, if you will, sigin sapsul, pepper, or sigin saps, which is pepper. So yeah, that's refers to the original pepper, long spice, the long pepper. Right, what else do we have here? Arsul nahal. Now, fiery yet sweet. Arsul nahal. Now, Arsul, I think, yeah, that's pretty obvious. We have the word ars, which is hot. Like, you know, ars, hot, and urs, fire, right? Fiery, basically, Arsul. And then we have the word haul. Now, you might hear me pronounce this and say, what the hell? I haven't had that kind of sound yet in Neo-Khuzdul. It's a weird one, to say the least. So, well, first of all, it's one of those words that includes a W, which is rather rare, to be honest. So, one thing that I want to say that you have there's two words for sweet in Neo-Khuzdul. Hulwul basically means sweet. There's two words. There is hulwul, and hulwul basically is the sweet, meaning it has a noticeable amount of sugar, and which is used for wines and similar products. Like in English, you also have sweets that can describe dessert wines, for instance. That kind of sweet. Noticeable amount of sugar. If you have that, then it's hulwul. It's not haul, which is more of the general sweet. Now, I wanted to talk about the pronunciation of haul. So it's somewhat unusual because normally when an L precedes W in Neo-Khuzdul, you'll get the schwa sound, the sound, which would make it hallo, hallo. Now, in haul, however, the sequence becomes like contracted. This schwa is barely audible, and the L itself kind of fades in the background. So the result is haul, haul. It's when you got to practice, I guess. Haul, a compressed pronunciation in which neither sound is really clearly articulated on its own. It's kind of like words like rhythm or awful or even. It's kind of eats up some of the sounds at the back. That's kind of what you have with haul. So instead of hallo, it's haul, right? There's not a lot of words like this, so be happy, I would say. It's just one of those. Right, then Galikama Badam Kalil, good for cold weather. You could kind of detect that from our beginner lessons. Then Rakust mi Zahar Kelet, and the dwarf by the window, Tark Biriz, the red beard. He is a firebeard. Now, there are 7 clans of dwarves. The firebeards are one of them. We'll go through those in a minute. That's why we're covering it in this lesson. It says, Atta bi Kagal Abad, or Kagal Ababat to be exact, because it's plural, from the Blue Mountains. So, Atta, again, the perfect form. He is. So, you have Tati, the imperfect, and Atta, the perfect form. So, Atabi Kagal Ababat, from the Blue Mountains. He is eating the lemon goat, Balaga. Again, Balaga is the perfect. Otherwise, it would be Tablagi rather. So, Balaga, and then Imbaratrag. Now, Imbaratrag is the word for goat. Comes from the word Imbar, which is horn, and then Atrag, that which carries. So, horn carrier, if you will. Imbaratrag. And Tahaf Sairul, lemony. Tahaf, well, I think Sairul you might not know, but Tahaf you should. Anybody recall what Tahaf is? Yellow, exactly. So, Tahaf Sairul. Sairul, well, we'll see in a minute what Sairul means. Well, I'll kind of mention it already. Sairu, it comes from the word Sairu, which means acid. So Sairu, so yellow acid is basically the word for lemon, yellow acid. So you add ul, becomes yellow acidy in a way, so lemony, if you will. So the lemon flavored goat, Imbaratrag Tahaf Sairul. Then he describes that. He says, Sir zai eze hamamul. So sir is the word for sour. Pretty easy one to remember, I think. It's almost the same thing. Sir, sour. then with a little bit of salt. Sei eze hamamul. So hamamul is a little bit. You might recall that I said mim ashlak, mim ashlak. The mim in ashlak means small, right? Small eatery, right? Mim ashlak. So little bit, hamamul. So those two M's are related to the two M's in mim. So a little bit, if you will, hamamul, a little bit, and mim from mimashlag are related to the same thing. Small, little, a little bit, right? So hamamul, a little bit. And ezeh is salt. And that is related to the word for sea, right? Salt, sea, you kind of see where that could have derived from, if you will. Then he asks a further question. He says, Ratati kust abanbassen. Now, in this case, he's not using the word atta. So atta, as I said, is he is, right? He's from the Blue Mountains. He is. Now, he's using tati. Why is he using tati? Can anybody answer me that? Why is he using tati in this question? Or in this? He's not certain. He's asking a question. So because he's not, it's not a dependable fact. Could also, well, say it's vividly ongoing. That's true, but that's true for all of the text here. So it's a question he doesn't know. There's no dependable fact, hence he must ask it that way. So ratati kust abanbassen, is that dwarf a stonefoot? A stonefoot, one of those clans. Kun, says the innkeeper, atta bi barazababat. Now here he uses not tati, but Ata. Why? Because he knows that this fella is a stonefoot indeed from the Red Mountains. So he's sure about it. There's no doubt in his mind. It has been confirmed to him already. And what is he eating? He's eating the Satnas Asmak Shalak, the chives soup. Now, okay, Balaga, he is eating. He's probably doing it in front of their nose at that very minute. Cannot be denied. Now, this Asmak or Asmak Shalak consists of two words that actually we've just seen, or the last one you already know from the beginner lesson. Does anybody recall what shalak means? Water, exactly, water. Related to shelaku, a cup of. So shalak, water, and then asmak comes from, if you think of the theme of this lesson, asmakul, taste. Asmak is taste. So asmak and shalak, because shalak also has an extended A, asmak loses its extended A and it becomes asmak shalak. So that's the word for soup. So it basically is taste water. That's soup. It's water with a bit of taste. Yeah, it's pretty accurate, I'd say. Asmak shalak is soup. And then sadnas is chives. There's I added a little bit of explanation of these words, why they are what they are. I'm not going to go through in detail here because we're going to lose a bit too much time otherwise. But sadnas is chives, so chives soup. And then he explains the dish, the taste of the dish. Samkur nadabel ak masapsul haga. Now, you might think, is this a mistake? Should this not be samkul? Because, usually adjectives end with ul. They don't end with r. Now, that's not a mistake. Samkur means robust. There are a couple of words that end with ur and not with ul. It's not like a different form of adjective marker or anything like that. It's just a different structure altogether. If something ends with ur or r, ur in this case, it means it contains something. It contains this or that. Now, samkur is one of those words. It literally means robust. So samkur nadabel, robust yet mild, but well-seasoned masapsul haga. Now, about sapsul, masapsul, and masapsul haga. So sapsul, from the word saps, spice. So that means seasoned. It literally means spiced. Sapsul, spiced. And then you have masapsul, spiced. So sapsul is seasoned. Masapsul, that which has been spiced. And then masapsul haga actually translates as well seasoned. So it's a bit confusing perhaps. but it's it's the expression you'd use in English, well seasoned. You don't say very much spiced. You wouldn't say that. So that's why I went for the translation well seasoned. Then Zudraiglukul, very well. Now, we've mentioned before that normally when you use very or much or a lot, you use the word haga. We don't see haga here, yet we see translated as very well. So, iglukul is the word, the more, ancient adverb of well, iglukul. And then zudra, high-reaching well, if you will, to a higher extent. Let me put it that way. Zudra iglukul, very well. Azrali amkat zirin hanadul kasamhili. I want the Iron Hill stew, please. Zai zars hamad yotorinkul. No, again, we go back to the yotorinkul we saw at the top of our page here. So yotorinkul, meaning some left, additional, spare, extra, right? So he's saying zai zars hamad yotorinkul with extra mushrooms. And a mug of your best or finest lager, best lager to be exact. Rashelaku zulelzu, so a mug of your lager. And then what kind of lager? Your best. So uglakul, your best lager. So we have seen galik, which is good. Now we see very well, which is zudraiglukul. And now we have uglakul, which is best. So it's all related to those same radicals. And finally, bujbu bahir. Bahir we've seen, which is wise. So bujbu is choice. So wise choice. Ajal doubly, just a moment. So ajal is a moment or an instant in time. And doubly is just only. We actually, I think we've seen a word in this text earlier, which was double. I'm just kind of see. Oh yeah, samkurna double, robust yet mild, right? So that's related. Double and doubly are related. So mild is related to the word for just. It means up to only a little bit of an extent. So just, or in this case, in double means it's mild. It doesn't go far along a line, right? That's why mild and the word for just are related. They go only that far. Right, then let's dive into asmak, rasamak. So asmak is taste and samak is flavor. Now, you'll see obviously that these are related what radicals is concerned. So no surprise there. Okay, let's look at the Asamak Zagashul. So the Asamak Zagashul, the primary taste. And we have sour, salty, sweet, savory, and bitter. So sour being sir, salty being eshul. So we had a little bit of salt was mentioned. Ezeh hamamul earlier. Ezeh hamamul. So ezeh. Eshul comes from ezeh, which means salt. Then we have sweet, which is that weirdly pronounced haul. So sweet. Savory, eshul sapsul. Savory, or in my idea, new word, umami, used for savory. Eshul sapsul. So, sapsul is from the word spice, so it is seasoned, if you will. So salty seasoned, savory. And then you have bitter. Now, bitter might say, when you look at the word for bitter, you might say, that's weird, because it might remind you of another word. The word here is kaf. What are you thinking of when you hear that word? Yep, coffee, exactly. So the word for coffee and the word for bitter is the same in Neo-Khuzdul. So it can mean both bitter or coffee. The dual meaning works in a similar way like the word for shein, the word roast, which can function both as an adjective as a noun. So as an adjective, kaf describes a bitter taste or quality. As a noun, kaf refers to coffee, understood as the bitter drink. So in everyday speech, dwarves will quite literally order a cup of bitter when they're asking coffee. The meaning is clear from context, obviously, but there's no distinction made really between the quality and the substance. It's the same thing. It's a cup of bitter. It's so bitter is kaf. Right, so those are the primary tastes, the asamak zagashul. Now let's look at the secondary tastes, the asamak nagashul. Now you might see zagashul is primary, nagashul is secondary. That is, well, not coincidental, let me put it that way. It's the ze starting in zagashul and then the nu starting in nagashul, which is secondary. So asamak, nagashul, secondary tastes. So if you look at those, we have the word seasoned, which we've seen, sapsul. So again, savory is eshul sapsul. So salty, spiced or seasoned with spice. That's what it means. Then you have buttery, which is daftul, fiery arsul, mild double, and robust samkur. Keep that in mind, it's not samkul. And then you have, well, asmakul is tasty, and then you have daftul, which is greasy. So daftul, buttery, daftul, greasy, because they're both from related words, which is daft and dafat. So butter and grease. Right, ingredients. Ekar. Ekar are ingredients. One ingredient, an ekar. Two ingredients, ekar. So we talked about hasas being meat. Now we're going to talk about several meat types here. So there's goat meat, imbaratrag hasas. So imbaratrag we've covered, which is the carrier of horns, if you will. Imbar is horn, atrag, that which carries. Imbaratrag hasas. Then there is pork, barat galt hasas, or as Gimli says, barat galt hasas eshul. Yeah, salty pork. Then there is, well, Barat's galt we've explained is the pink boar, right? And then beef, dalk muzum hasas. Now, dalk muzum is from dalak, which is grass, and the muzum is beast. So grass beast is basically a cow. So dalk muzum is the grass beast, and then hasas is the meat from it. So we have beef. It's another one of those Normandic import words in English, which comes from the French bœuf. So yeah, you have cow and beef. You don't have anything like that in Neo-Khuzdul. You have the word of the animal, and then you just add hasas to it, and that's the meat. It's as simple as that. Right, lamb, banit muzum. Now, muzum, I've said, is beast. Banit basically is, literally means young treasure. So, this comes from the term for wool, actually. It is the treasure of this animal. The wool is the animal's prime value while alive. So, yeah, this treasure element refers to the wool. So banit is young wool, young animal that carries wool. Let me put it that way. Which obviously is a lamb, and then we just add muzum to clarify it's the animal we're talking about, and not just the wool. So banit muzum hasas is lamb meat to be exact, because just lamb would be banit muzum. That's it. Chicken meat, kar zunj hasas. So kar zunj is chicken, which comes from the egg bird. So kar is egg, zunj is bird, egg bird. So again, we're looking at the primary identifying product of this animal in their viewpoint is an egg. Now, there are, I think I have a list of like 100 bird names. They all have an identifier, either the way they look visually, the way they sound, what they mimic. This always one. This one has been identified by something that all birds do, but yet this, well, it's one very productive bird at it. It's their eggs, hence the egg bird. Karsunj, chicken. Then obviously the meat from that is karsunj hasas. Right, then vegetables. danak khalaf. So danak, we've seen, is green, khalaf, roots, the green roots, the vegetables. Chives, which is, well, I'm going through all of those that we've seen in the audio earlier or that are somewhat related to it. Let me put it that way. So we have sadnas. By the way, where does this come from? Sadnas is from the word sadun is actually the word for boil or skin swelling. You might say, ooh, what does that have to do with chives? Well, as is the word reducer. And in olden days, historic days, chives was actually used to reduce swelling and boils and skin swellings. So that's where it comes from. Sadnas is basically boil or skin swelling reducer. That's what it means. Chives. Potatoes. Kamin tabal. Whereas Sam would say, if he spoke Dwarvish, kamin tabal. So kamin tabal, potatoes. Or kamin tabal is potatoes, and then kamin tabal is the singular. Now, where does this come from? So, kamin is the word for the earth. So, kamin means the earth, and tabal is apple. So, kamin tabal literally means earth apple. Now, this is obviously a mirror of several real-life world languages, such as French, where you have pomme de terre, which is apple of the earth, right? Then like Dutch, aardappel, where you have earth apple, same thing. There's quite a few languages that have that. So this is a calque, if you will, a copy of that in Dwarvish. So earth apple, kamin tabal, or kamin tabal in plural. One thing I want to note there is that the word kamin is the word commonly used to describe the soil, the dirt of the physical earth of Arda, while kilin is used to describe the people that inhabit the world. So both kamin and kilin are therefore used for earth or worlds. So depending on your usage and meaning, but if you're talking about the physical thing, it's kamin. If you're talking about the people that inhabit the world, then it's kilin. This is in the notes, by the way. So if you're wondering how kilin or anything like that is written, I've all listed those in the notes. Then we have carrots, katat. What does this remind you of, this word, katat? I'll give you a hint. It is, yeah. I was just going to say it's a color. So it is. So carrots and the word for orange are the same roots, and I think that makes perfect sense. Katat, carrots. Now, granted, there are carrots in other colors than orange, but I mean, most common ones, I would say, are orange. So katat or a katut is a carrot or carrots. So an easy way to remember, if you know the word for orange, then you will know the word for carrot. Then onions. And that's it's something completely different. But oh well, we're not going to cover that one now. Or actually, we might. There's fruit coming up in a bit, I think. I don't think it's in there, but it's not. It has nothing to do with carrots or the word for orange. But anyway. So onions, maglazam or maglazam. Maglazam is the word for onion, and it comes from cool, and so the word magl means calm or moderately cold or cool, and azam means coater. So literally describes something that coats in coolness, an apt reference to the onion's layered structure and its cooling freshness, if you will, when applied to something. So this might also have medicinal kind of background, if you will. So the magl azam, the calm or cool coater, literally, an onion. Then we have garlic cloves. Now, if ever there was a tongue breaker, definitely this one comes in the top 5, I think. So you have 2 glottal stops in one word. We're really going for it with this one. So let's break up the singular word. So we have akha bar anj. So there's 2 glottal stops in there. So akhag first of all, is the word for stench. So stinking, right? Akhag is stench. Then we have akbar. And akbar, now the thing is, you don't really, and that's the good thing. You remember I said with igim, you don't say that glottal stop because it comes after the vowel and before the consonant. Here, abar, you don't say it as well. It's not akbar, it's abar. So you don't need to say that first one. So that's already a relief. So akbar. And then you have anj, and there you have to say it because that's, it's the push on the vowel, anj. Anj means toe, and toe is a reference to the garlic toes, if you will, the little pieces of garlic, the cloves in English. In a lot of languages, that actually translates as toe, the toe of the garlic, the clove of the garlic. So individual shapes of cloves. So what, and abar is actually from the word for grower. I think we've seen that with the word, the grocers also used that in its noun. So we have stench, grower, toe. So stink growing toe. That is basically what a garlic clove is. And garlic cloves is then obviously the plural there. It loses its glottal stop, but that first glottal stop doesn't really matter because it's a silent one. So it's again one of those silent ones. So yeah, vivid and somewhat precise naming for a garlic clove. Right, lettuce, danak, banat. Danak, what color is danak? Green. Yep, danak is green. Banat, actually, it's from the word bund, which is the word for head. Bundu Shatur, for instance, is cloudy head, one of the three mountains of Moria, Bundu Shatur. We've actually seen both Shatur, we've seen clouds in the beginner lesson, and now Bund, head. So, yeah, and then Baras Imbar, we've seen Imbar today with Imbaratrag, and then Baras, as well as the red. So Baras Intrag is another, or Baras Imbar, rather, is another mountain of Moria. So you've basically know the meaning of two of them already. And Zirak, Zigil is the only one we still need to cover. We know Zigil, but not Zirak yet. So we'll cover that eventually. We'll get to the three mountains eventually. But we've got two of the three already, so that's not bad. So Danak Banat is actually green head. That's what it means. So those are the vegetables. Right, moving on to further Ikar. We're going to fruit. Right, so Zarsablag, tree food. We're going to start with lemons. So we've covered that earlier. So lemons, tahaf is yellow, and then asar comes from sayru, which is acid. Apples is tabal. This is not a compound. This is a separate word. Tabal is an apple, and tabal is apples. A pear is a turur afah. Turur afah. Turur means rough, unpleasant to the touch. That's what turur means, unpleasant or rough. And then afa is a drop. Now, why is it called that? Rough drop, basically. It's one, the texture of the pear skin is rough, and then its shape is shaped like a drop. So the rough drop is a pear. Then we have strawberries. It's the haul word again. Haul maran. Haul maran is strawberries. It means sweet berry, basically. Then other, nanar, others. Mushrooms, zarshamad, or zashamt is the singular of that, zarshamad. Pepper, zigin saps, and I said zigin sapsul is peppery. So again, this comes from the word long pepper, the original word for pepper. Then salt is ezeh, which comes from the word sea, salt. Butters, dafat, or a piece of butter, daft. Bread, hamat, a bread, hamt. Then we have dishes. Dishes are telar. telar. Soup, we've covered that. Asmak shalak and asmak shalak. So asmak shalak is a singular, a soup, and asmak shalak is plural, soups. Then roasts. So plural of roasts, so more than one roast, is shayan. The singular is shen. The adjective, like roast chicken, is also shen. Stews. Somebody's not happy with their stew. Amkad. Amkad or amakad rather. So amkad is a stew. I think that is our friend there with Lady Eowyn's stew, I think. Amkad's stew. Then platter is talar. You can see the link with dish is telar. A platter is a talar. Right. Then labiri ramek. So the fourth section is ababat bararaf. Ababat is mountains. Bararaf is families or clans. So baraf, family, clan. Bararaf, clans. So we're going to look at the clans of the dwarves. So there are 7 dwarf clans. There once existed another group of dwarves, though not officially called a clan. They were outcasts of the other clans. They were called the petty dwarves. They're now, by the Third Age, they are extinct. They were called the Neo-Khuzdul. Nuluk, by the way, is the Eastern word for moon. So we've seen Ibris, but also Nuluk is another word for that. It's typical. There's a list of nouns which is identified as typical Eastern words. So when we're talking about Eastern, that's the orange area here on the larger map. You might recognize this gray area, at least the left side of that gray area, as the piece that we recognize as Middle Earth, more or less. It's a bit of a rough map, granted. But yeah, that's the left part of that, up until where you would have Kant, basically, where you have the eastern part. Rune, for instance, is between the purple and the orange area. So let's look at those in a bit more detail. So we have, there are 2 clans considered to be Western clans. So let's start with those. So in the Blue Mountains, the Kagal Ababad, this is, by the way, the blue area on the map. This is the Blue Mountains. Now, granted, the Gulf of Loon cuts between those, and actually those Blue Mountains would be the northern and the southern, and you still would have a nice, it's not listed here or shown on this map, but you would have a nice little gulf, sizable actually, the Gulf of Loon there between those. But anywho, the Firebeards, the Urstarag, and the Broadbeams, the Fant Nuhub, are originally from the Kagal Ababat. I say originally because in the year 40 of the Second Age, they moved to Khazad-dûm to join their Longbeard brothers because their halls fell in ruin at the end of the First Age when the world was reshaped. So they lost their initial halls in the Blue Mountains there, although several came back later, and then the Longbeards also were in the Blue Mountains as well, where Thorin's Hall, for instance, is established. So Kagalabad, where we have the Firebeards and where we have the Broadbeams. Then the Baras Ababat, which is listed here in orange. Bit weird. I should have done that in red, I guess. But Baras Ababat, the Red Mountains. So we have the Zirin Mazan, the Iron Fists. You might recall Zirin Hanad, right? So Mazan is fists, Mazan being a fist. So Zirin Mazan, the Iron Fists. So those would be in the Red Mountains. Then we have the Aban Basan, the Aban Basan, a stone foot. More than one stone foots is Aban Basan. So they would also be in the Red Mountains. Then we have the Narak Zanat. Now Zanat we've seen, which is hair, but also used here as lock. So black locks, the Narakzant or a Narakzant and 2 Narakzanat. So the black locks. would also be in the Red Mountains. And then you would have the stiffbeards, Mebel Tarag. There's a little bit of a typo there. Should be Tarag, not Tarark. So Tarag, the stiffbeards. Mebel Targ is a stiffbeard. There you go. And obviously we have the Misty Mountains, Malasul Abad. So the Misty Mountains where we have or had Khazad-dûm, where Zirin Hana, the Iron Hills, also the same clan is present. Then we have Tafar Ababad, the Grey Mountains, where they were present but moved out, if you will, by dragons. And then Urt Erebor, obviously we're talking about the Longbeards, which is basically known as the central clan. You have two western clans, which are the Firebeards and the Broadbeams. Then you have four eastern clans, which are the Iron Fists, Stonefoots, Blacklocks, and the Stiffbeards. And then the Longbeards, which have been present in the Misty Mountains, the Iron Hills, the Grey Mountains, and even the Blue Mountains, where they had their halls, Thorin's halls to be exact. Right, so that's the clans. Now, there are some words, like the word Nuluk, that I mentioned is like an Eastern word for moon, Ibris. There are quite a few of those, but even though their language, having existed for about 12 millennia, if you count when Durin woke, etc., changed little compared to that of men. So while there's some alternate words, as I've mentioned, there's some minor differences in sound and phrasings, all dwarves will still be able to understand one another by the end of the Third Age, which is remarkable, really, because if you look at natural evolution of language, you can have pretty much a completely or nearly completely different language, almost indistinguishable from another in 1,000 years. Sometimes even much less is required for that. So given the fact that the Dwarvish language by the end of the Third Age would have existed for about 12,000 years already, then yeah, that's pretty mind-blowing that they still were able to converse, even though they had some minor differences there. Right, then one thing that we quickly want to do is go through the Mafalkul, and Mafalkul is the Dwarvish word for the perfect tense. So that which has been hewed. So the concept here is, why do we use the word hewed for it? So hewing in stone, because it's dependable. It's something you can't change anymore. It's hewed in stone, right? And that's ata, to be in the perfect form. So ata ni mafalkul. That's what we're going to see now. So if we compare it to another one we've seen, balag, for instance, balaga, to eat. So atmi, I am, atsu, you are, atsi, you are, but then the female version of that. Ata, he is, atai, she is, atma, we are, atsun, you are, then the female version of that, atsin, aton, they are, atin, they are, but then the female version. What you notice is that these endings are identical. So this is not a special verb in any way or kind. The only thing somewhat special to it is the fact that it has a glottal stop at the start, while the imperfect form does not have that. You say tati, you don't say taati or anything like that. So there is no glottal stop in the imperfect. There is one in the perfect. That's the only kind of weird thing about it. But the endings are exactly the same than the ones that you've seen with others. So the only thing you need to recall basically is that the stem of the perfect form to be is glottal stop at. That's it. So at, that's the stem, at. While stem for balaga is balag in the perfect. At is the one in the perfect form. So balaga, to eat, obviously. And then at for to be. So ata, he or it is. Now, the imperfect, in contrast, is called the magalbul, which is that which has been spoken, because it is a vividly ongoing action speaking. And that's why it's used for the imperfect. While, for your information, the imperative is the mazakshul, that which has been instructed, which also makes sense because you use the imperative for commands, orders, and instructions. Right, so again, on the topic of the perfect form and to be, So keep in mind it uses a glottal stop, while that is not the case for the imperfect, where it simply uses the structure AT. So tati, why is it an extended A, which is kind of weird? Because the base is AT in the imperfect. That's the base for the to be is AT. And because you already have an A in ta or sa, right? Sa or ta in the third or second, then obviously that becomes an extended A, and then you have tati, sati, satya, etc. Those are extended A's because the stem of the to be in the imperfect is A and T, which is, yeah, that's unusual, let's say, but that's the way it is. So I have noted that in the notes as well, with a little bit of explanation there why these are what they are. Right. So I want to go quickly over again. This is a little recap of what we've seen in our last lesson. The perfect, when do we use it? We use it for dependable facts. Can be the past, not necessarily so. Could even be the future. Normally, when you translate from English to Khuzdul, you use the perfect to convey the past. When you do Khuzdul to English, you should only use it when they are dependable facts, right? So just to keep that in mind. Then imperfect versus perfect. It's not a linear thing. It's not a question of time necessarily. The perfect are for dependable facts, also for a personal past. So if you're talking about a personal experience from your past, often we'll use the perfect for the simple reason that these, from your standpoint, are dependable facts because you have experienced them yourself. The imperfect, on the other hand, is for vivid actions, things happening in front of your eyes, questions as well, because they can impossibly be dependable facts, doubts that you may have, or even considerations of politeness. If you don't want to give like a harsh denial of something because you might hurt somebody's feelings, you might not go for the perfect, but for the imperfect. That's also a reason. Right. Then a repeat overview of the endings, what we've seen already, imperfect, perfect. So with the imperfect, you have a or I stem. With the perfect, you have a double A, W, or a double E or EA. Now those last, not that frequent, but still they happen, and you will have seen quite a few of them already in the flashcards, those stems. And then the imperative, you will add I or an extended I to that stem, and then an I at the front as well. While this is for a 2 radical word and a 3 radical, you add only extended I to it. Using this structure like iglibi, for instance, or guluba imperfect, or taglibi in the imperfect. Right, we've come at almost the last of our lesson. This is a new thing, the foundations of the week, the akatur ala hadet nurt, foundations of akatur. So this week we've learned about, first of all, various tastes and flavors. We've learned about essential ingredients, the 7 clans of the dwarves, the to be in the perfect form, a review of the perfect form as well. Right, so that brings us to the end of our first intermediate lesson. Now, the thing is, today we worked with a lot of new topics, okay? We've worked taste, flavors, dishes, ingredients. The subject matter itself is new, but the way we worked with the language should feel somewhat familiar. We use structures and habits that you already know and applied them to something new. So, but it's completely normal if the new words don't feel fully settled yet. I mean, we've just seen them. It's only normal. The new vocabulary always needs time and repetition, really, and that's what the flashcards are for. You'll notice, though, that this lesson is really heavy with the vocab. That's intentional. There's a lot of flashcards. On the other hand, well, apart from the fact that this is the largest vocabulary set across both the beginner and the intermediate course. So if you look at all of the vocab of all of the intermediate lessons and the beginner put together, this one has most vocab of all of those lessons. So yes, that's a consequence of adding a lot of vocab at the start of a course so that we can pick and use a lot of these words when building our later sentences. So that's kind of the big push that we're seeing now. Well, the good news is that vocabulary-wise, the next lessons will be much lighter. Makes things easier. Today's vocab has been split into several categories in the flashcards, making it a bit more manageable to learn. And because this lesson is intentionally very vocabulary heavy, you'll find that there are fewer extra documents in the post-class folder this time. So we're not really focusing on grammar or a lot of new things in this lesson. I've added documents about pronouncing certain words. And there's also another document in there as well. Can't recall what right now, but there's one or two extra documents in there, but nothing major really. So the upcoming lessons will shift the balance more toward the grammar, and there will be a lot less vocab. As always, don't worry about memorizing everything straight away. Focus on understanding it, using the language if you can, becoming comfortable with it. Fluency comes back through use, not through pressure and repetition, really. Let me end with this. Nabhari gagin buhaye. We're going to learn things together again, my friends. It's just a question of time. We'll continue from here next time, building on today's material step by step. Take your time with the material, and I will see you in the next lesson. Shamuk Sulu.